Adapting to adversity. Resilience is the ability to do just that, to roll with the punches despite the challenges before you. Could resilience help build a better world? Rather than reacting, would we be better off taking deliberate, planned, and proactive risks? This week on Full Frame, we explore how embracing resilience could help companies, organizations, and people thrive in the face of unpredictable events. I'm Mei Lee in Los Angeles. Let's take it full frame. When nations and communities are faced with adversity, from raging storms to civil wars, surviving them takes resilience. But can we learn to be resilient regardless of the challenge? A new public-private partnership believes the answer is yes. The Rockefeller Foundation's Global Resilience Partnership is trying to help communities across Africa and Asia build their resilience to challenges like extreme poverty and climate change. Now, one way they hope to start the process is with a competition called the Global Resilience Challenge. Sunday, Bridget Jones is the Rockefeller Foundation's Associate Director of International Development. She joins us now via satellite from New York City to tell us more about the competition, and that is helping the world's most vulnerable communities become stronger and more resilient. Sunday, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, May. So pleased to be here.
Well, let's start off with a broad question, Sunday. The Rockefeller Foundation, of course, is involved in so many different projects around the world, really trying to help cure the ails of the world, let's put it that way. But with the world being so chaotic these days and so many problems, is it sometimes overwhelming to decide what causes that you're going to try to help at the Rockefeller Foundation?
Well, you know, thanks for that, May. I think we at the Rockefeller Foundation see a world that's defined by disruptions, disturbances to normal life, and you've mentioned many of them. And it's, in a way, caused by three different threats, if you will. There is the threat of climate change that, of course, is an undeniable contributor to the severity of some of the issues that we have. There is, of course, urbanization, where we see a huge population growth, particularly in cities, and causing a good deal of pressure for cities around the world. And there is globalization that's actually accelerated the pace of the volatility in many communities. And we see those three really as being some of the drivers of some of the challenges that we have.
And Sunday, let's get right to talking about the competition that I mentioned in the introduction, the Global Resilience Challenge. Tell us a little bit about why you started this challenge.
The Global Resilience Challenge is indeed unique, but it's a model that we've been using for some time that helps to uncover and test some of the most really compelling solutions for resilience building around the world. The Global Resilience Challenge was modeled after a competition, a design competition that we supported in the New York, New Jersey area after Superstorm Sandy. It's called Rebuild by Design. And the challenge is really one of the first activities of the Global Resilience Partnership. We launched the partnership in August 2014 at the first U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington, D.C., where the Foundation and U.S. Agency for International Development and the Swedish International Development Agency joined forces to really find a platform for supporting these kinds of really promising, innovative solutions for resilience building around the world. And it was such a tremendous response to this global competition in the Sahel, which is West Africa, in East Africa, and South and Southeast Asia. We had over 500 applications for this competition, and it was really tremendous to try to get down to having 17 contestants and 8 winners, really going through a 3-stage process that focused on how they might be able to diagnose problems in their communities, how they can come together in interdisciplinary teams with a number of actors to be able to look at those problems in a different way, in a way that focuses on resilience thinking and concepts to help to drive them towards some really promising solutions for communities. So we're really quite pleased that we have a terrific set of 8 awardees.
And what I find fascinating, Sunday, is the quality of the entrants. They're all pretty young, very smart, very well educated, but they all have the same mission in their lives, in their young lives, to try to do some good in the world. And that must be really inspiring to see.
That is indeed the case, May. I think we have a number of teams that have come to really focus on what are the most pressing problems in the communities in which they live. The teams actually represent meteorologists and engineers and scientists and community leaders coming together to try to help to solve some of these problems. And let me just give you maybe 1 or 2 examples of some of the work that the teams have proposed in terms of really fascinating solutions. One is the Grameen Foundation, and they've compiled a number of folks on their team to really focus on how to improve the resilience of coconut farmers in the Philippines. And that's obviously a top agriculture industry for the Philippines, except some of those coconut farmers are really some of the most vulnerable in their community. And so what the team has proposed is try to connect those farmers to markets. So offering financial services, mobile technology to provide them information that helps to understand the conditions under which the coconuts are growing, the coconut trees are growing. And all of this is really to increase productivity, reduce their vulnerability, and ensure that they have better livelihoods in their communities. And so that's really quite exciting. I think similarly, when we go to West Africa and Mali and Niger, we have another team in Mercy Corps has partnered with groups of organizations and businesses and government to really try to improve agri-pastoralists' access to financial markets there. So again, it's very much a focus on increasing their access to financial services with a real attention to women who have been, in some cases, marginalized, not having access because of cultural norms or other circumstances in their communities to some of these services. So we're really looking at teams that are focusing on really exciting innovations in their community, in these communities that are helping the communities adapt to some of the stresses and shocks that they might face.
And unlike a lot of competitions we hear about all over the world, not just, when it comes to social good, but sometimes the issue and the problem is that they win, but then there's no sustainability in the idea. There's no long-term lasting effect. I would imagine that would be crucial in this kind of competition to choose those projects that really are going to have a long-term effect.
Indeed, you hit the nail right on its head, and the long-term sustainability and impact is a huge criterion for selecting many of these solutions. And what was really fascinating about this challenge process, again, modeled off of Rebuild by Design in the New York, New Jersey area, was the time that they had 2 to 3 months to actually start to pilot some of their activities, their solution-oriented activities in various communities to see whether the community would actually have an uptake of what they were proposing. And that was just kind of, an early indication that this could actually be much more impactful than one would originally believe. And that's certainly been the take that we've had moving forward with these teams. And let me also just say that this is not a challenge whereby teams come up with designs and solutions on their own. I mean, we're walking side by side with many of the teams, trying to reinforce the understanding of what resilience thinking and practice means in these communities, and also to help to connect them to the kinds of networks and resources that they will need to be successful in implementing the solutions.
Does this give you hope when you see all this activity and the growing trend of this interest in trying to give back, trying to change the world for the better, and that you see this youth movement becoming more and more interested in this, or is this a phase? Is this just a, just a trend that's going to go away? Or do you think this is an ongoing, growing trend that we're going to keep seeing?
So, May, I not only see hope, but I see hope that leads to action and people really wanting to take charge, come up with identifying what important local needs are really that they're facing in their communities, and trying to find the kinds of approaches and tools and solutions that help to address some of those needs and challenges. So this is really about acting on the notions of resilience concepts and thinking, and with resilience being really about building people's adaptive capacities to not only survive but to thrive in the face of some of these disruptions that we've been discussing. And so I see that this is something that's not going to be short-lived. This will be with us for some time, and we'll all be better for it.
I sure hope so, and I would have to agree with you. We would definitely be better for it. Sunday, in terms of the everyday person, every person isn't brilliant like some of these, I'm sure, these competitors in the challenge. The everyday person has to put food on the table and go to work and, kind of live their everyday life. But when it comes to giving back, when it comes to the idea of resilience and trying to help the community, what do people at the Rockefeller Foundation actually recommend, just to the average schmo on the street?
We've been talking about the circumstance in which we're all living here in the 21st century, where crisis is the new normal. And what we've found in our work around the world, here in the U.S., but also in many parts of Asia and Africa, is that the solutions really lie within individuals and their communities. So we believe that these great ideas, these activities that we all can do and help us to thrive in the face of some of the shocks and stresses, can be found with the very everyday person that you've been describing, May. We know people are resilient all around the world and have been coming up with innovations on a daily basis, innovations that are born by the activities of communities coming together, of networks coming together, of drawing on one another for support and for recovery efforts in many of these cases. And so this is not a situation whereby one looks outside of their community necessarily for the kinds of innovations that we're discussing. This is a case where we're looking within, that we're really finding solutions within communities.
All right. Well, Sunday, Bridget Jones, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the information and the insight.
Thank you, May.
Well, coming up, we hear from two of the winning teams who are building resilience in communities that face some of today's most difficult challenges. Stay right there. Developing resilience in places like West Africa, where war threatens access to food, or in Southeast Asia, where typhoons plague farmers, can seem like an impossible task. But 8 teams from around the world are tackling some of the world's most difficult challenges. The groups recently won grants from the first Global Resilience Challenge. It means they will be awarded up to $1 million to implement and scale up their solutions to these problems. Joining us now are leaders from 2 of those winning teams. Whitney Gant is Grameen Foundation's Global Director for Mobile Agriculture. Her team plans to help coconut farmers in the Philippines. And from Rabat, Morocco, via satellite, is Allison Huggins. She is the Country Director at Mercy Corps in Mali. Her team plans to use its winnings to financially help communities in the fragile dry lands of Africa. Welcome to Full Frame to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Whitney, let me start with you. Why did your team choose to compete in this resilience competition? Because there was 500 teams in this competition, right?
Right. Well, resilience is really at the heart of what Grameen seeks to achieve. We look to increase the income and resiliency of poor households in remote rural areas across the globe. And what we've seen in our work, particularly in agriculture, is that often a single intervention isn't sufficient to help families come out of poverty, and even more importantly, to keep them out of poverty when they do. And so a more holistic approach is needed that provides a suite of services and also helps families build the skills and access the resources that really help them weather the types of shocks that they're facing, whether it's from climate change or from market variability.
And it always is about sustainability, right? You have to be able to sustain this growth and this economic viability. We're going to get to, the specifics of that. But first, tell us, what exactly is your project? It has to do with coconut farmers in the Philippines, right?
It does. So there are over 2 million coconut farmers in the Philippines. They, despite being part of a $2 billion a year industry globally, are some of the poorest farmers in the Philippines and the most vulnerable to the type of shocks that we'll talk about today. Typhoons, climate change, market price shocks, etc. And so what our program is looking to do is to partner with public and private sector players to build resiliency of those coconut farmers through a 4-component program. And so the first component looks at how can we increase the amount of coconuts that these farmers are producing to get them more sales and more revenue. The second is looking at how do we help them prevent losses, and that's through an early warning system, which helps prevent pest and disease outbreaks and helps farmers to control that on their farm when they identify a threat. And it's also looking at getting them more market access, so higher prices through certifications like organic, fair trade, and rainforest. And finally, through looking at appropriate financial services. So whether it's investing in their farming businesses and growing those through access to credit, or whether it's saving for the hard times that may hit, we're partnering with financial service providers to provide a complete solution.
Okay, so you're covering pretty much all bases, which is great. Well, let's turn to Allison in Morocco. Allison, first tell me why you guys decided to compete in this contest. And then also, your project is a little bit different. It deals with problems in West Africa.
Right. So similar to what Whitney said, we've been working in the drylands of West Africa for many years, and we've realized that in order for us to have a sustainable impact in the communities that we're working in, we really need to take more of a holistic approach to the work that we're doing. And so we were thrilled to be a part of the Global Resilience Challenge and to be able to work with other organizations that are using similar holistic approaches and really looking at the systems that people live in and how can we have more of a broader systemic holistic impact to help people to be able to improve their livelihoods and really make choices that they need to make to be able to better manage their livelihoods. So our project is working in northern Mali, in the Sahel region of Mali, and across the border in Niger. And in communities where we've been working on agriculture programs and emergency response for many years. And the project will be working to provide access to financial services for those populations. In northern Mali, there's almost no financial services available due to the conflict. And in Niger, financial services are really limited as well. And so we'll be using the mobile phone and working with the private sector to deliver savings products to farmers and pastoralists, as well as credit products and insurance products over the mobile phone.
So, Allison, give me one definition, though. You use the term pastoralist, and it's agro-pastoralist. Tell me exactly what that means. I'm assuming it obviously has to do with agriculture, but is it something more specific than that?
Right. So there's really two livelihood groups in the areas that we're working in. One group who are more sedentary agro-pastoralists. So they use a combination of agricultural production and raising animals for their main livelihoods. And then there's also a substantial nomadic pastoralist population. And they really travel from place to place searching for the most healthy grass pasture lands and bring their cows along with them. So they're really, not tied to any one place. They move around in search of the most rich pasture lands that they can find.
I see. Okay, so it's almost like a nomadic lifestyle to a certain extent. Whitney, let's go back to you. With these coconut farmers in the Philippines, you obviously talked about some of the issues that they face with climate change and, weather and things like that. So are those the specific problems that you guys are trying to target and help them out with? And that's kind of a difficult thing to deal with, isn't it? Because you're talking about nature, also man-made problems as well, right?
It is, and that's why we are trying to take, again, that multifaceted approach that brings in partners from different parts of the Philippines. So we bring in the Philippine Coconut Authority. They have the mandate to help provide advice, technical advice to farmers and to help prepare them for the changes of climate change. We're also working with a national university, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, who's created a number of climate models to predict what the impact will be on smallholder farmers. And so part of what we're doing is working with those entities who know best how to predict and how to respond, and then also looking at how can we diversify livelihoods for those farmers, so helping them get into additional crops, whether they are for home consumption, so fruits and vegetables, or whether they're other cash crops like cacao that won't be as susceptible to some of the changes that are coming.
And how do you find them responding to your program and to what you're suggesting they do to be able to sustain their livelihood? Are they responsive? Do they get it? Are they willing to make some changes?
I think that they are. We've, through the grant award, we've gone out and done a lot of research and really focused on being in the field with farmers, being in their households, understanding the dynamic that they have with the existing market. And what we're seeing is that there is a sense of awareness around vulnerability, but not a clear sense of how they go and build assets and help to secure their families. What we also found was that the female members of the household were more likely to take that longer-term view. And so in terms of how we'll reach out and work with farmers, we know that we need to have a gendered approach that takes into account the different dynamics on the ground.
That's an interesting point to bring up, because I always wonder, and you always hear that within communities, the females are really the ones that are sort of holding the family together and oftentimes holding the community together through the work that they do. So how important is that to reach the female population and to be able to educate and raise awareness amongst women?
I think it's very important, and it will be a key pillar of the work that we do, just really understanding what are the roles and what are the household dynamics in terms of gender. And so men were also very critical in that system, but had maybe a shorter term view of how do I meet the immediate needs. And so in talking with them together as well as individually, what came out was that we really can leverage this longer term view that female household members may have.
That's interesting. Allison, I'm going to ask you the same question in your line of work and the people that you work with. Do you find that to be the case as well, reaching out to the women because they tend to maybe have a longer term point of view?
We definitely do. And women in northern Mali and in Niger have really limited control over financial resources and have limited participation in household decision making. And so part of our program is starting with financial education to especially allow women to better understand how they can control resources, how they can better access financial resources. There's a tradition in West Africa of small savings groups, and women are often the ones who are members of these savings groups. And so we'll be working through these saving groups to increase their access to credit so that women can have financial resources at their disposition and can really plan around how they use those financial resources to either invest in small businesses or invest in goats or chickens or other small livestock that they can have control over, because helping women to better be able to have tools to manage their households is really what we've seen as being key to helping communities and households to weather the shocks that they face.
And that's so interesting, Allison, because we hear those stories over and over again when we hear about things like microloans. When they're given out to women, they tend to really use it in the best way possible, very efficiently, to be able to grow a business and really provide for the communities. But here's my question, though. In places like Mali and Niger, is there any resistance, though, from the traditional male sort of ideals for women, against women, to really develop and become financially savvy and grow businesses, things like that?
It is a difficult context, and I think that the key to us being successful in our programs is really to use a community-based approach. We work really with both men and women, and work with male community leaders to try and evolve some of these norms, but really, together with the communities, because we don't want to take an approach where we go into communities with these radical new ideas that are against community norms. But we found that by working together, we can help to slowly evolve these norms and help women to have a greater role in decision making and household management.
What are you foreseeing in the next few years with this project?
So the goal of our project is to work together with the private sector to help them move into more risky areas of Mali. There's a pretty well-developed financial services market in the south of Mali, but in the north, due to the conflict that began in 2012, as well as just a long history of marginalization and isolation, these types of services are really much less developed in northern Mali. So we really see this project as a starting point for us to be able to work with the private sector to help them to take the risks to invest in the north of the country. And we hope that by working together and proving to them that there are market opportunities in the north, and that people are interested in financial services and products, it will demonstrate to the financial sector that there are other opportunities to work there. So we're hoping that together with the private sector, we'll be able to kind of create market incentives and spur a market to continue to grow in the future.
What's great about both your projects and what you're both saying is that you're not just trying to help the little guy just puddle along with their business. You're also trying to bring in corporations, big business, to help them realize that if they get involved and there's some sort of financial interest there, right? It's all about business as well, that it makes sense to them. And so this is a way, with both your projects, you're able to sort of tie those two worlds together, isn't it?
Exactly, and I think Franklin Baker is a great example of that, where today they are sourcing only 10% of their coconuts directly from the smallholder, but they have a goal within the next 5 years to be sourcing 50% of coconuts directly from smallholder farmers. They also have about 10,000 hectares that are organic, and they want to increase that up to 50,000.
Wow.
So there's a big opportunity here to not only generate value for the smallholder farmer, but to make this something that can be profitable and, as a result, sustainable long term.
Well, Allison Huggins, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Morocco. Really great project, and good luck to you. And I should have congratulated you at the top of the show on winning this competition. It's good work.
Thank you so much. We're excited about it.
All right, and Whitney Gant, thank you so much for coming into the studio today and telling us about your fantastic project. Again, to you, congratulations to you and your team, and good luck in the future with it.
Thank you. We'll have to keep you posted.
Please do. Please do. Well, building resilience in communities facing adversity, whether it's the impact of climate change or man-made crises, is crucial for people all around the world, including right here in California. The state's ongoing drought is causing many communities to find proactive solutions to their water problems instead of waiting around for rain. Full-frame contributor Sandra Hughes takes a look at how innovators are finding solutions to fight the drought.
When the rain falls in Los Angeles now, conservationists head directly into the storm.
Well, we're sampling for stormwater runoff. We're sampling the quality and the quantity of stormwater runoff. At this point, we're taking water samples. We're filling individual bottles, which will be analyzed in a lab for different water quality parameters.
They're testing water quality as part of a plan to harness Mother Nature to save and store more water. So the next time a long drought hits, the western U.S., especially Los Angeles, will be ready.
People think that we live in a desert, but we don't. It's a semi-arid environment. We actually receive quite a bit of rain, between 10 and 15 inches a year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but for every inch of water that rains here, we throw away 3.8 billion gallons of water. So on the driest year in recorded history, 2 years ago during the drought, it rained 3.6 inches in Los Angeles. That means we threw away over 12 billion gallons, or 3,420 gallons per person.
Is there a way to save that water and reduce the city's dependence on imported water, and for the ground to stay wet in even the driest of times? Conservationists in Los Angeles think so.
Well, the City of Los Angeles has implemented a green streets and green infrastructure program. This is one of our first green streets in the City of LA. Construction actually was completed in 2010, so the inception for the project and design started a couple of years before that. And as part of our green streets program, what we're looking for is in sanitation is our focus is on water quality and water capture.
The idea is to break up the concrete jungle of LA one block at a time. It started in a working-class neighborhood of Los Angeles called Elmer Street. The street was bulldozed and rebuilt, installing an underground infiltration gallery to absorb and filter rainwater. New sidewalks were put in, and curbs with cutouts, and rock gardens below rain barrels with smart irrigation technology. The efforts are meant to slow down rain runoff so it could be filtered and drained back into a natural underground aquifer.
And we essentially use this as a living laboratory, a demonstration of things that work and, of course, things that don't work. Because we want, when you put in these green streets, you learn each time one of these projects goes in the ground.
And the ground is where the conservationists are hoping to keep the water. Without these efforts, water runs into sewers or flood runoffs and heads straight into the ocean. Even the plants on Elmer Street were chosen for their power to clean water and absorb it.
Plants are living things that help to, in this instance we're talking about stormwater. If you think about the roots of plants and trees, they go into the soil, they help to integrate the water into the soil much easier. Of course, they're also stopping erosion. And in the swales, where we have the very steep-sided slopes, if you have plants in there, it's helping to slow the water down as it's rushing through the swale during a storm. And it also helps the water to infiltrate into the soil. Also, they're filtering out pollutants, too.
More than $2 million was spent to create Elmer Avenue, the gold standard of water conservation in Los Angeles. Obviously, the idea isn't to replicate that price tag on other city blocks, but to take ideas employed here and use them in other drought-stricken areas.
The Green Streets Initiative has built a dozen streets like Elmer in Los Angeles to work together with the new LA Stormcatcher Plan. The idea borrowed from Australia, where residents suffered through more than a decade of drought.
It is very simply an old-fashioned cistern, and the high-tech piece is that it is remotely controlled and remote monitored.
This box mounted on the side of a home contains electronics that monitor weather and then opens and closes the cistern as needed. When released into these garden pools, the water stored in the cistern can irrigate an entire yard. A fence could be replaced with narrow cisterns. The sizes and ideas are endless, but the bottom line is reducing LA's dependence on imported water.
Rainwater captured and either recharged where possible or directly used together can replace half the water we're importing today.
And the unpredictable weather patterns that have plagued the southwestern United States in recent months could be the perfect storm in which to prove that green streets, alleys, and yards are the solution to California's continual water woes. For Full Frame, this is Sandra Hughes in Los Angeles.
Coming up next, it's all about going miniature to help save lives. We'll journey into the world of tiny artificial livers. Conducting medical research can be challenging. Just ask world-renowned bioengineering professor Sangeeta Bhatia. During her grad school years at MIT, Sangeeta tried and failed to create an artificial liver. But she didn't give up. She tirelessly kept at it, and her resilience finally paid off. Sangeeta pioneered a way to create micro-livers that are sustainable outside the human body. Her groundbreaking research has revolutionized the world of artificial organs used for transplants. I sat down with Bhatia at the 2015 annual meeting of the Clinton Global Initiative to talk to her about her motivation, innovation, and how her research is making the world a healthier place. Sangeeta, people like you inspire me a great deal because I feel like I cannot understand the work that you do, and it requires a very large brain. So do me the favor, tell me first how you got into the work that you do, because it's not an everyday sort of field.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah. So I started out as an engineering student. I was interested in biology, and I was good at science and math. My dad said, you should consider biomedical engineering. So off I went to study that. And I got very interested in materials that could be used for nerve regeneration. So it was this idea that like plastics and polymers, remember like The Graduate, the movie, like the plastics are the future?
That's right.
It was that time, so it was sort of like late 1980s. And they were making new kinds of plastics that we thought could help with nerve regeneration. And that was my undergraduate project, and I got very interested in this idea that you could use engineering tools and material science for medical applications.
Amazing. So, but did it all make sense to you right off the bat? I mean, you knew, oh, you know what, I'm pretty good at this, and I think this is the field that I need to be in.
So I really liked the idea that instruments could change human health. Like that from the beginning had captured my imagination, but it turns out that that's really broad fields. Like you could make a new MRI machine, right? That's one kind of research, it's more physics. You could make like an artificial hip. That's a different kind of research, that's actually materials. And then what we work on, which I mentioned, is actually like living systems, like organ regeneration and nerve regeneration. And so it took me a while to kind of figure out where in the scheme of instruments meet medicine I wanted to be.
Okay, but now that you've obviously focused on that particular area, was it something that was so new and different that really no one else was really working on it, and so you had to sort of carve a path for yourself?
I think so. I mean, in some ways. So the sort of tiny little subfield that I'm in is one where we use computer chip technology for medical applications. And that was actually really pretty new. So I started graduate school in the early 90s, and I went over to the computer manufacturing facility on MIT campus, which I didn't know existed except for that my boyfriend at the time was in electrical engineering. He would later become my husband. And he said, I know you're trying to do all these things with cells and patterns, and there's actually a whole computer fab on campus that the electrical engineers use.
Okay.
So I found my way over there and figured out how to use those instruments to make artificial livers. And that became kind of my life's work so far.
Well, again, in layman's terms, for those of us who don't get it, how do you create an artificial liver using a computer chip and living tissue? How does that work?
So, so to make an artificial liver, you need liver cells. And the liver does like 500 different functions. So it does a lot of different things. You can't really replace it with a simple filter.
Right.
Like a kidney we can replace with a filter, and the heart we can replace with a pump. So mechanical things. So for the liver, you really need a living cell.
Okay.
And the problem in the field had been that liver cells, when you take them out of their body and you try and put them in a machine to use them, they quickly die. And so my job as a graduate student was to figure out how to basically copy the environments that they saw in the body in the Petri dish. And that way they would still behave like liver cells, and then we could use them to process someone's blood.
Okay.
And so the way we copied the way they are in the body is using computer chip technology. So we would pattern them on surfaces. We would write lines of cells and surround them with the neighbors that they saw in the body. So there's 5 cell types in the liver. So, and then we would recreate these little structures, and because they had all the right signals from their neighbors, they would behave properly.
And how, I don't even know what to ask at this point. How long does that take to figure that out?
Yeah, well, so it took a long time.
Okay, yeah.
So a PhD is about 5 years.
Yeah.
And the sort of the key, every PhD project has a sort of a key turning point, kind of a pivot. And mine came after a year of failed experiments. And the experiment went like this. You start with a piece of glass, which is clear. You shine light on it, which is not visible. You dip it in a bunch of chemicals, which are clear. And at the end, the goal is to make liver cells line up in stripes. And I tried this over and over and over again, all different versions of it for about a year, until at the end of that year of research and little improvements and thinking about it different ways, it finally worked. So that 1 year was like the real breakthrough. It still took us about 10 years to sort of like make a product out of it that we could share with the world. But that was the kind of aha moment.
And that product now is out there.
Yeah, so the product now are little tiny human livers. We make them and we sell them for drug testing, actually. So that if you have a new drug and you want to know whether it will be safe in the body, you can pour it on our little liver and test it without having to expose patients to it.
And it functions like a real human liver.
Right, for about 6 weeks, which is long enough to test it.
So the future of this, then, would be to actually create full-size human livers for transplant.
That's right. Yeah, so once we figured out how to make little livers, then we decided we wanted to scale up and make a replacement for transplant. And that we do with another engineering technology, which is 3D printing. So we can print layers by layer of livers instead of just like a tiny little layer, and build up a bigger organ that way. And the liver is cool because it can regenerate on its own. So you don't actually have to build the whole liver, which is 100 billion liver cells.
Wow.
You can build, we think, a little piece of it and then kind of encourage it to grow on its own.
Tell me about nanotechnology.
Sure.
Is that related to this kind of work, or is that something different and separate?
So it's an evolution of the same sets of technologies. So the computer manufacturing methods that I mentioned to you, they're really good for manipulating things as small as single cells. So a single cell is about 10 microns, which is a tenth of a human hair.
Wow.
So pretty narrow. And as I got into the field kind of in the 90s and the early 2000s, because we were trying to make computers faster and faster and faster, the field was making the technology better and better and better at making tinier things, all the way down to the nanoscale. And it turns out in biology that's super useful. So if you make something that is as small as 100 nanometers, now you can make a detector that you can inject in the bloodstream, and it can go and it can find cancer on its own.
Wow.
And it can send out a signal. And it's only because it's so small that it can kind of find its way through the human body.
So you're able to explore parts of the body and cells that you would never go near before.
Exactly.
Right, right. So that has got to be a revolutionizing technology for, obviously, for ailments and curing ailments and cancer research.
Yeah, so we call this field nanomedicine. And it's sort of everything that's 100 nanometers and smaller, so 1,000 times smaller than a human hair,
right,
on down. And the trick is, in fact, that you can get inside of all of the human organs. So it turns out that this is the exact length scale that molecules communicate in your body.
Wow.
And it's good both for detection, so for early detection of diseases that would be more curable, so cancer, for example, as well as treatments. So what we do is we try and target drugs, let's say chemotherapy, just to the tumor, to spare the normal tissues. So it's useful both for kind of getting a window into the disease as well as treating it better.
So it must be amazing to you because you're seeing how much technology is helping in the field of medicine. I mean, it truly is changing the way that medicine is being done and executed.
Yeah. So it's an amazing time to be a researcher because we think of the sort of convergence of these two fields. So on the one hand, we've had all these engineering advances, right? 50 years of what we call Moore's Law, which is the exponential growth in computation power that comes from growing things tinier, tinier, tinier. So that's one thing. And on the other hand, we have the human genome and genomics, right? And now they're coming together at this moment in time, which is just incredibly exciting.
Are we just going to jump by leaps and bounds in the medical field because of this growth in technology?
So I think so. I mean, so some people call this kind of the third revolution of science. And I think we'll look back in 20 years at this kind of 5-year period and really identify it as an inflection point. There are some technologies that have come out just in the past couple of years where we can, what we call, edit the human genome. There's a new enzyme that can go in and actually change your genome and repair it. You know, the therapeutic possibilities are just amazing. That means like all the genetic diseases are potentially curable. And, you know, I think it'll take us about 10 or 20 years to get those safely into patients. But looking back, I think in a couple of decades, we'll say this is like when it all happened.
Here's an ethical question for you. Some people might say, and they have said, that science sometimes pushes the boundaries a little bit too much, changing DNA structures, genomes, you know, all of these things that we couldn't do a couple decades ago. And now we're really starting to push those limits. Is there ever an ethical conflict that you see or have gone through yourself in research?
I would say most of the work that I do is well within what myself and others consider important and impactful. And we do animal research. I have 2 young daughters, and my little one wants to be a vet. And she says to me all the time, why do you have to do experiments on mice? You know, and I explain that we do it ethically and how do we do it, and it's better to know that a medicine's safe before it gets into a person. So I would say that's kind of the closest piece that I have. Right. But there are things that we work on that are highly contentious. I feel pretty confident about the ability of the scientific community to kind of self-regulate. We did that with recombinant DNA. We had a conference called the Asilomar Conference where the thought leaders came together and set out what the constraints should be and what the practices should be.
So it's discussed.
Yeah, and that's happening again now with CRISPR, which is this new genome editing technology that I mentioned to you. So, you know, the typical pattern is that we'll have a self-imposed moratorium for a year or 2 while we figure out what we should be doing, and then we'll sort of carefully engage. I think that's sort of part and parcel of the way that we do science.
Yeah. Let me switch gears for a second.
Sure.
You being a woman in science, you know, there's always discussion that there aren't enough girls going into science and math and technology. And so how can we inspire these girls to do that? What do you think? I mean, because you're such a success in your field, you've been through it. You know what the barriers are, and you know that still the educational system seems like it doesn't try to push those fields for girls. What's the problem still, do you think?
So it's a great question. I think there are 2 main challenges. The first one is internal. So if you look at women in engineering, I'm an engineer, you see that at age 11, very early on, girls start saying that they're less interested in science and math and the sort of feeder disciplines for engineering. And we know that part of that is a lack of role models. And part of it is that they're opting out. It's not that they're not capable, it's that they're choosing something else. And they're reacting in many cases to what people call a chilly climate or a geeky guy culture. And there have been some really promising advances recently. So there was a 5-year concerted effort made at Harvey Mudd College, where they did 3 things in the curriculum. They gave them role models. They made the engineering curriculum more project-based instead of like theoretical, abstract concepts. And they made the freshman class divided by experience level, so you wouldn't be intimidated by the geeky guys.
That's smart. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and over the course of 5 years, they increased the number of computer science women from 12% to 40%. So there really are approaches out there that can work and are scalable, I think.
What do you think that is? Do you think women just want to have more sort of hands-on, because like project-based, instead of classroom theorizing, maybe they want to experience more, do more?
I think so. I mean, so it's hard to understand why, but they do see in many fields that women tend to respond better to projects that have more tangible impact on society. So women and men respond, but women respond more.
Right.
So project-based learning is, sort of a trend in engineering in general, but it has the side effect of pulling in women. The second piece, which we didn't talk about, is bias, right? There's overt discrimination, but nowadays, at least in the US, it's mostly unconscious bias. And at MIT, that's been sort of really handled head-on. We train the faculty, we have a diversity officer, we make sure everyone gets the same pay. And that's doubled the faculty numbers over the course of 10 years. So, all of these things, I think, have interventions now associated with them.
I mean, it's researched that in the past, the problem was that female students weren't even called upon in class, in college, by the professor. They sort of were overlooked.
Yeah.
But it's
so
good
raise
to
your
hear.
hand. I mean, even Sheryl Sandberg, just sit at the table. So a lot of that is, internal, making sure that women participate, gain confidence, they're encouraged.
And so you're seeing that change going on, so that must give you some hope that there's going to be a lot more girls interested in these fields and wanting to go into these fields.
It does. I have a little bit of pause because in biology, we've had over 50% women for 20 years at the undergrad level. And if you look at the biotech startups in Cambridge, 3% are started by women. So there's something else that happens. It's not just enough to get them into college. There's who's in the boardroom, who's a founder, who are the venture capitalists. So, I think it's important that when more women are coming in, but we need to do more to keep them in and to grow them up as leaders.
That's encouragement enough, I think, when girls see those role models rather than just imagine it.
I think so. Actually, there's good data on that too now.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, I know. It's called the role model effect.
Oh, nice.
There was an amazing study done in India. I was in politics. But what they showed was that there's a bunch of villages where they had a quota system, and they had to have women elected to government in those villages. And they found in those villages over the course of 10 years that young girls, their aspirations for themselves improved by 30%, and that parents' aspirations for their daughters, just by having a woman in government, improved by 20%.
Wow.
So the fact that the community could see a capable woman in power.
That's right.
Changed people's aspirations for themselves and for their children. So, I think that really translates across fields.
Last question then. What's next for you in terms of your research?
Yeah.
What's coming
We have
up?
lots to do. So we're working on this early cancer detector. And we're really excited about making a urine test for early cancer detection for things like breast cancer and colon cancer and ovarian cancer and lung cancer.
Wow.
And we're hoping to be able to deploy it globally so it could be really cheap and available at the point of care. And in order to do that, we just started a company that can take it, through manufacturing and regulatory. So that's kind of my latest baby.
That's a big baby.
It is, yeah.
And that would be amazing if that were to come to fruition, just a simple urine test.
It would be exciting. Yeah.
Well, good luck to you, and thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time. Amazing work that you're doing.
Thank
so
you.
keep on doing it, and keep on being that role model.
I'll try.
And we'll be right back with this week's Full Frame Close-Up. Nothing makes us stronger than love. Research has shown that healthy, loving relationships can help build resilience for people facing stressful or traumatic situations. Love, as it turns out, can help buffer our hearts. But is a week enough time to discover love and then marry within a month of meeting? Well, we found one couple who is out to prove that rushing into marriage may not be such a bad thing.
For the hopeless romantic, there's never enough romance in life. And love is, well, simply ageless. And that couldn't be truer for Frank and Margaret May. Within a week of meeting each other, the widow and widower were engaged. Within a month, they were married. Today, they are newlyweds.
The best thing that ever happened to me.
Me too.
You see, Frank and Margaret fell in love while they were in their 90s.
So we didn't have much longer. I mean, I was 90, and he was more than that.
I'm 92.
So while getting married after only knowing each other for a month may seem a bit rushed.
Yeah, you don't rush into anything at 90.
No, not 90.
Margaret and Frank decided to make their love official.
A few weeks ago, Mom and I were at church. And so Mom went up to Father Bill after as we were leaving, and she said, you know, I think you'll probably be the one that's going to bury me. And I actually have a place in Greensboro that I'm going to. And so I think Father Bill was a little taken aback, like, well, let's not rush things here. So when I called Father Bill last week, and I said, do you remember Mom making that comment about when we go out of church? He goes, yeah, I do. And I said, well, would you mind marrying her before you bury her? So thank you.
Dearly beloved, we've come together in the presence of God's witness and blessed and joining together this man and this woman in holy matrimony.
Wait, now, everybody back up.
And with the Reverend's blessing, Frank and Margaret were now husband and wife. And they both say they'd do it all over again.
It's wonderful. It's just absolutely wonderful. Really.
If love is just a game, Frank and Margaret are happy to be players, believing their love connection makes them both winners.
Well, because I thought he was very attractive, and he was a good conversationalist, and we had a good time together.
We can look at each other and burst out laughter and laugh for 10 minutes straight.
Wonderful. I've only known Margaret for all of a week and a half, and she just sort of brought warmth to my life. I love your laugh, I love your smile, and your whole demeanor is just wonderful. So I couldn't be happier for my father, and I wish you the very, very best.
You're here.
Frank and Margaret prove you're just never too old.
The most gentle and kindest man I've ever met.
And that falling in love, like good wine,
It gets better and better.
You're here.
is truly ageless.
That really is the sweetest story. And that's it for this week. Join the conversation with us on social media. We are CCTV America on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And now you can watch Full Frame on our new mobile app, available worldwide on any smartphone for free. Get the latest news, headlines, and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Weibo. Search CCTV America on your app store to download today. And all of our interviews can still also be found online at cctv-america.com. And let us know what you'd like us to take Full Frame next time. Simply email us fullframe@cctv-america.com. I'm May Lee in Los Angeles. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again next time.